This is the Franchise QB Podcast, where we empower entrepreneurs to win big in franchising. We huddle up weekly to educate our audience about the most successful small business model ever created, franchising.
Welcome to the Franchise QB Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Halpern, a 20-year industry veteran and entrepreneur. My mission is for listeners to achieve their American dreams of creating wealth and independence through franchise ownership. Every week, we speak with franchisees, franchisors, or vendors that support the industry. Thank you for joining us, and let's get started. Joining us today in the Franchise QB Huddle is Tony Hulbert, CEO of HorsePower Brands. Welcome to the show, Tony.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Glad you're here. So for the audience, HorsePower Brands is a leading portfolio company in the home services franchising space based in Omaha, Nebraska. Their 8 brands include Mighty Dog Roofing, Blingle, iFoam, Heroes Lawn Care, Gatsby Glass, Groovy Hughes, Bumblebee Blinds, and Stand Strong Fencing. Additionally, there are 8 shared services companies designed to support HorsePower Brands franchise owners. Today, we're going to discuss, among other things, a new technology that HorsePower Brands created called Howie. So let's kick this off, Tony, by learning about your entrepreneurial path, your past experiences in business and franchising that ultimately led you to HorsePower Brands and led you and your team to develop the Howie technology.
Great. Well, again, thanks for having me and being part of this. And we're excited to talk about Howie. As it relates to myself, I was the typical CPA for many years out of college and spent a lot of time doing that. I jumped in at a young age as a CFO of a distribution company within the PepsiCo system. And I'll come back to that because that was a big influence in terms of my life, in terms of thinking of a portfolio company and the end consumer being part of that PepsiCo system. During some years, I also jumped into the entrepreneurial pathway of retail nutrition stores and worked with individuals that own stores, 60 plus stores over across 17 states. And that was in our early 30s. And we were just going at it, and we didn't know what we knew. And we just kept figuring things out, and I learned a lot about that from a perspective of being an entrepreneur and understanding whether we're going to be able to make payroll or what the results were, and just living that day to day. So that would be the true entrepreneurship of just being in it with that group of gentlemen that I spent many, many years with. And I look back, and that was a great influence. I actually went back to that PepsiCo system at a time, and I went back into a sales and marketing role. So I was the vice president of sales and marketing. At that time, we had about 300 plus employees. It was all family owned, but it was a consolidated effort that we brought in many companies, many other Pepsi distribution companies under one centralized version. And just got to see more of the PepsiCo system, not just as the CFO of that local distributor. We're privately owned, but now in a sales and marketing role, and got to experience being on the accounts alongside Walmart, Dollar General, large drug chains, C-store chains, all these different things. And you think about national or global scale, like PepsiCo is one of the best in the business. From there, Josh and Zach, our founders, gave me a call, and it took me a good 6 months to make the decision. And at that time, it wasn't HorsePower, it was Mighty Dog Roofing, our first brand, and came over as the CFO, was the interim brand president for that brand early on for the initial 6 months. What born out of those initial 6 months of Mighty Dog Roofing was HorsePower Brands. And then we're here today, 3.5 years later, and still going along. You mentioned the 8 brands. We're actually going into the heating and air in 2 months. That's awesome. That's going to be a brand called Varsity Zone, Heating and Air. Yeah. So we're going to take that athletic theme, red versus blue, and go attack that industry. And we're excited about the heating and air industry, without a doubt.
Hey, tell me the name again. I think I stepped on your line there.
No, you're good. Varsity Zone, Heating and Air. So awesome. It's going to be, you'll see the trade dress, the vans and the trucks going down the road, and you'll have a red versus blue heating in there, and it's going to be really cool.
Yeah, I love the name. That's really neat. Coincidentally, the first company I worked for out of college was called Varsity Books, and we competed with Amazon. I think you know who won that one. So, well, that's awesome. It's really cool that you have that corporate experience with Pepsi at a local distributor, and you talked about like scaling a an entrepreneurial venture in the nutrition space to 17 states. I mean, those are amazing lessons that are hard to find. So that's really cool as your foundation for, now being the CEO of HorsePower. So let's talk about Howie a little bit. In your experience, what are some of the challenges that that are faced by new and established franchisees? How do you aim to address those challenges with the Howie technology?
And our founders came from a franchise space and they understand franchising extremely well. And so the customer of HorsePower Brands, the easiest way to explain it to your audience is the customer of HorsePower Brands is a franchisee, is the candidate looking to be awarded a franchise, and we support that franchisee. The customer of Howie, the portfolio, is the homeowner, the consumer. And at the end of the day, we believed it was a better path forward to separate the two so that we can clearly focus on marketing and supporting franchisees and bringing them into our system under the HorsePower system, but then also offer marketing opportunities on a portfolio level to bring all of our brands together. And so the easiest example that I initially introduce is the Marriott. Everyone who is either a Marriott or a Hilton, you become a member of that system, and regardless of which hotel you stay within, it's usually within that branded system that they offer. So when we look at Howie and we mention those 8 to 9 brands that we have on the consumer side, that homeowner eventually long-term will fall into the Howie system, start to discover new services and new brands, and just discover that across the metro areas within their local community. So that was the initial context as we look back to 3 years with Howie.
Very cool. Yeah, thanks for sharing that with us. So HorsePower obviously has grown at an impressive pace, not only the franchise owners that have joined the system, but also the brands you folded into the portfolio. So, in your view, what are some of the key strategies that have enabled HorsePower's growth through franchising?
It comes back to, we have 3 uniques that we really focus all of our attention to within HorsePower and the franchise side of it. One of them, as you mentioned earlier on, was the Z services, or our shared service model. And so we don't want to simply just offer the brand roofing, Mighty Dog Roofing in the roofing industry. We want to also offer the opportunity to understand bookkeeping, marketing, a contact center, whether it's phone calls, texts, or messaging, and a number of other services that we offer. So the Z services and the shared service model is one of our uniques. We believe that sets us apart. The second one is we look at everything data within our system, and we look at data as a strategic asset. And we could talk an entire episode just on that piece and bore most of your audience maybe, but the data as a strategic asset, like, it becomes a currency in today's world. It becomes a value at the end of when you're selling your business. And so we're piling on the amount of data that we're working with and within our system. So that becomes a differentiator. And then the third one is Howie. And so when we look at the success of HorsePower, we're taking the 3 of those pieces together alongside each one of these brands, which on itself stands on its own as a franchise brand and is comparable to many franchise brands outside of it. But when you layer on top of that brand, these 3 separate uniques that you gain from HorsePower or Howie, we believe it's a win-win.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the data as a currency, and a lot of, kind of aspiring entrepreneurs don't think through that. But if you own that data, then there's a lot you can benefit from it. And sounds like you guys recognize that. And because of your economies of scale, that data is going to be really helpful, not just for, one brand, but for the entire, portfolio, which is really cool. So tell us a little bit about what sets Howie apart from other home ownership resources. How do franchisees benefit from this technology?
Well, first, Howie was an idea 2.5, 3 years ago. But the reality is we need franchise density and brand density in markets to make it come to fruition. Right. So just like Marriott, you need enough hotels in Dallas, Texas for the Marriott Bonvoy system to even make sense, right? Mm-hmm. And so it was intentional and to this point where 2024 is the first time we're actually having this conversation. You're one of the first that I'm having this conversation on a podcast and discussing it, because openly for the last 3 years, we had to reach a point where we had franchise density and brand density. So that's first and foremost. It is a long-term view as how we look at it. But what we look to become is an accelerator in markets. We don't have to be a national brand across every single area across the nation, but within Dallas, Atlanta, Nashville, Tampa, areas of the country where we have multiple franchisees, multiple brands, we can become a national brand within those areas under the portfolio of Howie. And so a differentiator is the acceleration piece, where the franchisees that will benefit will always be the next one. The next one that comes on will benefit from the many other franchisees that help build it to that point. And so when I start to think about 3, 5, 10 years from now, maybe a time where I'm no longer, maybe I'm too old, the benefits that will continue to accrete and continue to climb and continue to build, it will be astonishing just because of those experiences and those data points. So that's one piece, is just how do we combine all of our efforts across all these brands? We're building something great here. So how do we combine all the efforts? The second piece, and I want to jump into it, but what's very cool that has happened in talking about Howie with our franchisees, we've done this from the beginning. We've talked about our vision and our idea of Howie, but it's coming around in 2024 with real initiatives. So the first part is digitizing the customer experience, which simply means a forward-facing software tool that the consumer can see. They can book appointments, reschedule appointments, add the level of convenience, this frictionless customer journey for that homeowner to be able to communicate with us, all being able to do that under Howie. That's an initiative that is rolling out in test markets this year in 2024 that we can really perfect that and continue to build upon that. So that's the first step, but digitizing that experience within Howie is a second benefit. And the third one we can dive into as well, but then it becomes these how the franchisees come together. Franchising's difficult already, the franchisee and the franchisor relationship. One thing that we are hopeful is the franchisees want to see Howie succeed in their market because it helps all of them. And so it truly is a combined effort. And so there's Howie events, Howie huddles, Howie happy hour, Howie gives back. And we're really tying into how we can attack a market in a meaningful way by combining all the resources.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I guess from the user standpoint, I like that there's like 3 different interfaces. You have the consumer that can book the appointment and kind of get the service scheduled and performed. You have the franchise owner that is going to oversee how their business is doing through the app. You have the technician that's going to have access to it. And I guess you also have the franchisor that's kind of sitting back and aggregating all this data that's just going to help everything get better. So that's really cool. So let's shift gears a little bit and discuss some views that you've gathered on the role of a successful franchisor. What are some of the essential ingredients for a successful franchise relationship? You talked about that a moment ago. From your perspective, what do you have to do to kind of build that trust and that collaboration between a franchisor and a franchisee to win in this space?
Yeah, and I think back to even the PepsiCo timeframe. They called it bottler agreements, but it's very similar to franchise agreements. So 20% of the U.S. was privately owned, and you had the rights to distribute their products in those markets. Now you're distributing a product and a brand that is known around the world. And so as a bottler, as a franchisee, what really do we have to complain about from that context? But still there was contention in that system. And I stepped back and I was on, the bottler side. And I'm thinking, what do we have to complain about? We had these brands rolling down the street that everyone knew, like we were nationally recognized and all that. Names. Yeah. And so the first thing as a franchisor is a constant focus on that relationship. And it's never going to be perfect. There's always going to be times where we have to work together and get through moments. So I talk often about cooler heads will prevail. Let's have a discussion. Let's get through this together. Let's build that system. So I do think that there's something about being a franchisor and always having a vision that is 3, 5, 10 years out, because it gives something for everyone to march towards or chase and go grab. Otherwise it becomes kind of like a job. And when people say buy yourself a job, like what are we building together that will be bigger than something individually we can't do? And that's a key part of franchising. You truly are trying to combine efforts that you can't do on your own. So I think that's one piece. Another piece as a franchisor that you continue to learn is, and you continue to do a better job at, is setting expectations on the front end, during, on the backside, in all phases of that franchise relationship, setting expectations of what this is for the franchisee to be successful and what that person's going to have to do and what their responsibility is, what our responsibility is, and what we're going to do. It's a constant thing that you continually adjust and make sure that you're setting the right expectations so that when that person's in the system, they knew exactly what they're getting themselves into. They know what it looks like, and they also know where they're going. So I think those are two key components that, I share with our teams here at HorsePower frequently.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really great observation. A lot of misconception around franchising is you sign an agreement and the business runs itself. I mean, that couldn't be further from the truth. Like, franchising mitigates a lot of challenges. It gives you so many head starts and advantages. But at the end of the day, you can't teach grit, hustle, determination, motivation. Like, those characteristics are so vital to the success of the business. So that makes a lot of sense to me. It's like, give them the tools to win and make sure that you support them between that peer network and between the franchise support system. But at the end of the day, the franchisee has to produce results. So you talked a lot about Howie today. How do you see technology overall transforming franchising? Are there any trends that franchisors should be kind of keeping their eyes on or aware of?
Well, I am a geek behind the scenes. So I follow the technology. I was a CPA at one time. So I love technology. I think artificial intelligence is one of those buzzwords that is used too often and in the wrong context. And I think I don't even know if necessarily a lot of people understand what it could be or what it is. I don't even know if I necessarily know it, but I think AI is something that is thrown out there often. Now, if we step back and start to think about it in the home service space, being able to use a drone and take a picture of a home and having that software actually put measurements together that could translate into an estimate for a roof on a home and be able to shorten the time it takes to estimate that roof and getting it to a point where maybe it's even, again, customer, like a frictionless journey, because I'm a homeowner, I'm busy, and I simply just want an estimate of what it would take to replace my roof or repair my roof. Being able to use technology in that form to smooth that process even further. There's technology that we're utilizing in our Groovy Hughes painting business, where if the homeowner would engage in that process, take 8 pictures of their exterior side of their home, we could actually estimate that home from this seat. And we can take those pictures and it will get measurements close enough to provide an estimate that we can
that's so
adhere
cool
to
because
and
you
support.
already have collaboration with that potential customer, and they're kind of like, there's buy-in there. So there's like, we're working together already before the estimate's been accepted.
A lot of innovation, I think, could occur in home service, and it's not going to come from any one contractor, because if I own a roofing business and I'm successful, I don't need to invest in technology to do that. I have my process to estimate and measure and provide a bid, and I'm successful. But looking at it from a franchisor lens, we can invest in that technology and improve that experience and bring that to market in a more meaningful way. I see that piece. The secondary piece is just how we communicate with businesses. The question of call centers, the question of messaging, the question of how does that look long term. And we talk long term in the world of technology. 3 years is like the equivalent of 30 years, long time before. So I don't know where the market's going to go with technology in that space, but I see that space changing significantly, and we're already testing areas of that. But it's going to take a few players to come in and really make a big change there. And I think that just how we communicate with our contractors for our home, I think it's going to be a big difference 3 years from today.
Yeah, and I think it's cool that you guys are not only building out your own tech, but you're also leveraging other vendors. So if you keep those good vendor relationships for things that you don't want to reinvent the wheel, but participate in a great product that can benefit the system, and then build out things like Howie, like, you're going to stay one step ahead of the competition. So that's awesome. So let's talk about franchise owners. Like, what do you look for in candidates? I know that's going to differ brand to brand, but what advice can you give those exploring franchising as a business model? And, who do you look for, and what should they be looking for when they're trying to find their franchise match?
Yeah, and from brand to brand for me, I get that question often, even from the candidates coming through the process. It's the same for me across all the brands. And you mentioned a couple of the buzzwords and the keywords of grit, hustle. One of the areas I talk to at length in our leadership call is those first 12 months, that initial 12 months, and this is coming from a CPA, focus on revenue generating activities. And going from being a CFO of a very large business to going into being the vice president of sales and marketing, you understand what impact you can make by growing top line revenue. And the amount of energy it takes to do that is far easier than cutting expenses or trying to reduce costs or any of that stuff. So revenue generating activities, we talk a lot with semi-involved owners or owner operators each day, like how are you prioritizing your day, your week, your month, your quarter, your year, especially during those initial 12 months, is 80 to 90% of your time networking or building customers or doing something around building revenue. And you talk to a lot of candidates, I'm sure, that come from a successful business, that they were in an operational role or an engineer, and they do want to own their own business, but now they got to shift their mindset. They can hire the team, but they need to shift their mindset back to revenue generating activities and put energy towards that. So that's one piece of people that want to come in and grow the business. That's a characteristic that matters to me. Optimism, a long-term view, being able to follow a process and a system, and understanding that you're part of a total system, a team player. There's some other characteristics that you hadn't mentioned that are key, I think, that are important to anyone that is starting their own business. And we did it. And I was a franchisee, opening up nutrition stores, going into states we'd never been into. And it didn't matter what the cost of rent was or the cost of people, 10 extra hours in a week. We went over hours on budget. If we didn't hit the sales budget or the goal for the week, all the other stuff, it didn't really matter at the end of the day. We had to hit the sales goal, and then we could start to minimize costs or look at costs and efficiencies and things of that such.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, it's good to obviously kind of coach candidates and new owners to really have great time management skills. And not only that, focus 80% of your efforts on the 20% that makes that top line grow. That's important to your business, and get rid of those little distractions or outsource those distractions.
Yes.
So that's really, that's good advice to, be laser focused on what makes you good at what you do.
If you even look at, not to cut you off, but like the Z services, that's why we chose a bookkeeping firm. Why do we want to make sure that they need bookkeeping? They need to make sure that they have financials and they're doing that step in their business, but they shouldn't do it. And so we offer it at a very nominal fee. And if you are able to go source one additional job in the week, it pays for that plus more. And so figure out a way to focus on all those activities. And we're going to offer shared services to take away those inconveniences to business ownership so that you can focus on the things that matter.
Very cool. And just switching gears quick on the kind of other side, if you can give a piece of advice to someone that's got an established business and is thinking about becoming a franchisor, what would that piece of advice be?
I'm not sure I'm the person to ask, because the first piece of advice I'd say not to do it.
Have a ton of capital and don't do it.
Yeah, there's just a lot of things that have to work in becoming a franchisor. If it's your first attempt at it, there's many people have been able to do it, but if you really share with and sit down with those people and you talk about their initial 3 to 5 years, those are years that were difficult. Now, to be able to do what we're able to do, we're fortunate. We have a founder that has the capital and is investing into the HorsePower system in a meaningful way that allows us to grow at that scale. But then we hire a lot of people from the franchise industry to support franchisees, because that's just in itself is a different way, different type of an employee. And it's not easy because you're taking people through those initial 12 months of any business. I don't care what it is. We're doing that within every brand, 30 plus every year across 8 brands. That's a lot of brand new business owners learning the steps of the way. To try to spin this and provide some positive outlook to somebody that has a business that's successful and wants to look to be a franchisor, I would say seek advice. And the most expensive advisor is going to be the one that has no experience. Seek advice from people that know what they're doing. Reach out to consultants that can provide you candidates that they're better educated as to what this is. And so the system of consultants, you guys do a great job of bringing people in better educated than somebody that doesn't have a consultant. So there's a lot. Just seek advice, I guess, is what
it's a really good comment you made about like the wrong advisor is going to be the most expensive, because if you go down the path of doing something the wrong way, boy, is that going to be costly. So I think getting multiple opinions by people that have kind of clout in the industry is going to be super helpful. So we're going to wrap up here in a minute, but one thing I did want to touch on, HorsePower Brands uses EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System philosophy. Zach talks about it all the time. He loves the book Traction, and the organization has adopted it. It's not a computer operating system. It's a people operating system. It allows putting the right people in the right seats and makes everything productive and accountable. How has that impacted the franchise system by adopting that mentality and kind of coaching new owners through that system?
it's a work in progress. It's a constant work in progress. But the moment people adopt it, and you got to adopt the full aspect of it, you can clearly message to your suppliers, your vendors, your employees, everyone within your business is what you're trying to achieve. The beauty of the entire system when you get to this spot, because we've been able to achieve it within HorsePower, is I'm able to jump on a call and clearly explain to you that our 10-year, our big, hairy, audacious goal is to be $1 billion in system-wide sales and be operating in 50 states. We've started that since 2021. We think we're going to hit it by 2027, but that was our 10-year target. And then if we broke it down to 3-year plans, to annual goals, to quarterly rocks, to weekly meetings. But if you know where you're trying to go and you can start to break it down and just simply do the math, you have some good people within your organization that can put the numbers into a spreadsheet and show you that it's possible. Now it's about telling that vision over and over within teams and build the team and the infrastructure around it. You could do that in a small business, and you could do that with a heating and air business. And maybe your 10-year target is to reach 3-4 million. It's whatever the number is. Now, how are you going to break that down to a 3-year plan? Where do you want to be in 3 years? And then, okay, now that you know that, where do you want to be in 1 year? Okay, now that you know that, where do you want to be this first quarter that you start your business? Now we're going to break that down to 13 weeks to get you there. Yeah. And it seems simple in a conversation like this. Sure. The discipline it takes to follow those steps is where the beauty is. And once you reach that discipline, it just becomes easy. And so then all the employees on my team clearly know what our vision is based on those criteria, and they know where we're marching, and then they're able to share that to their teams, and we just break it down. So I think we're a testament here at HorsePower. We're able to grow at a fast pace, but we're all marching towards this one common vision, this one common target, regardless of the brand or the employee within our organization.
That's awesome, man. Really appreciate that. Yeah, it sounds like if you have the discipline, then you can kind of shape the behaviors, and those behaviors are going to lead to those milestones being achieved. So I like how you break it down. And then it's like, hey, this is a big, hairy, audacious goal, but we're going to accomplish it just kind of like step by step. So that's cool. Well, Tony, you've shared a lot of great stuff with us today. Anything else you want to add to the mix before we wrap up?
No, Mike, I appreciate you inviting me, and I love what you do and sharing some insights from all sorts of walk of lives on this call. And I think that's important for your audience, especially if it's a prospective entrepreneur wanting to start their own business. Again, seeking advice, seeking knowledge. This type of content's meaningful for the right type of person listening. So I appreciate what you do.
I appreciate the compliment. And if anybody listening would like to learn more about HorsePower brands, contact me at franchiseqb.com or on Twitter at QB I'll get you connected with Tony and his team. Thank you so much, Tony, for taking the time to get in the huddle and discuss HorsePower brands and Howie with us today.
All right. Thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you for listening to the Franchise QB podcast, where you're at the helm of your future as a franchise owner. If you enjoyed the content, please rate the show and recommend it to anyone that might be interested in franchising. Make sure to visit franchiseqb.com to subscribe to my newsletter and for an actionable playbook to go from walk-on to legend in your new business. Follow us on Twitter at QBFranchiseQB and join us every week for a new episode. See you next time.
Visit franchiseqb.com to take the next step of your journey towards wealth, independence, and franchise ownership. And remember, when working for the man gets old, you must do something bold. Thank you for listening.